Hello, everybody, and welcome to Friday's Live. It's Friday. I am so scratchy. I'm sorry. Um, welcome to Friday's Live. It's Friday, which means new records on Find My Past. It means new newspapers to talk about this week. It means all sorts of things, which is very exciting. For those of you who are watching and join us regularly, you know what to do. Put yourself in the comments. Let us know who you are and where you are, what you're working on. For those of you who are new, welcome. We're excited to have you. Please join in the comment thread because it is the place to be. That's where all the good stuff happens. My name is Jen Baldwin. I'm the research specialist for Find My Past. And joining me today is Liam in the comments. He'll be helping and answering questions and providing probably some Scottish humor. Cheers, Liam. Thanks for being here. Right, it's Friday. For those of you who have watched before, you could probably tell I'm a little scratchy. I am struggling from allergies. It is very much allergy season already in Colorado. It hit me yesterday, and oh my, it really hit this year. So I'm going to do my best to not be crazy today, but I'm not feeling my best. I have a little bit of a tea here to help soothe my throat. So I'm going to take little sips of this throughout the hour. Let us know what it's like. So in Colorado this morning, it's right around 48 right now, but our high today is supposed to be 71 Fahrenheit, which is, I looked it up, 21.6 Celsius. So it's a gorgeous week in Colorado, although we do have a high wind warning coming in this afternoon and through the weekend. So it's so good to see spring finally coming. It's probably fake spring, right? It's like the first spring before you get to this third winter or whatever we're going into. But it is nice to have a couple of good days, and we're like excited about planting in our garden and like getting some vegetables going and stuff. So it's good. All right. So Liam's already made note in the comment section, but yes, when I was last over, well, actually, it was last year, wasn't it, Liam? It wasn't the last time I was over. He really encouraged me to start saying cheers instead of thank you, and it's taking me some time, but I'm practicing. So cheers. Right. So Gina's with us in sunny Lincolnshire. That's nice. Daphne is in windy Somerset. So always love this. Actually, I think the weather patterns over the UK actually are really fascinating. I'm such a dork that way. Andrea's in the cloudy Stoke-on-Trent. Jillian's up in Edinburgh, still a little bit wet. Gray and drizzly in Thirsk for Joe. I don't know where Thirsk is. I'm going to have to look that one up. That's a new one for me. Janet in North Wales is showery and breezy. David is with us. Gordon's with us. Snowy. Where is Gordon? Oh, I don't know. Interesting. Okay, Sarah's in Wexford. Mixed weather in Lincolnshire for Jean. Sunny in Maidstone with Robin. Very windy in Suffolk. Promised 20 degrees tomorrow with Victoria. That should be nice. That would be nice. All right. Yeah, lots of people chiming in. This is really good. Windy in Shropshire with Rosie. Karen up in North London. Working on a presentation about British India records. That's very cool. That sounds interesting. I would like to watch that. Leave in the comments where you're going to do that presentation, especially if it's online. Thanks very much. Rainy Massachusetts with Roz. A snowstorm yesterday. Oh, Roz, I'm sorry. And actually, my sister is on Long Island in New York, and she just messaged me like 20 minutes ago. They had an earthquake. So for anybody in New England or the New York area, the mid-Atlantic states, please let us know if you're okay. She said in her area it was a 4.8 magnitude. So, I mean, she's okay as far as we know. Everybody's okay, but earthquakes. Whew, I'm telling you, man, it's crazy. All right. Oh, North Yorkshire, Joe. Thank you very much. Gordon, snow in Alberta. Mm-hmm. Not quite spring yet up north, is it? Rita is in Cherry Hill, New Jersey. So you felt the earthquake too, Rita. I hope you're okay, and I hope everything around you is okay, and like the community and the property. Earthquakes can be so devastating. But you're online watching, so everything must be all right. I'm going to make that assumption. Yeah. Okay. Good. All right. Lots of comments. From Liam, spring means 2 degrees, which he later corrected to 5, and pouring rain in Dundee. You know what? Rain is a good thing. When you live in forest fire country, rain is welcome. So that's good. Yeah, Daphne says my son lives in Taipei, and they had a terrible earthquake. My cousin and his family also live in Taipei. So yeah, we've been getting reports in from him over the last couple of days. It was awful, actually awful. Thankfully they're okay, but and I hope your son is as well, Daphne, and anybody he cares about and loves. But yeah, yeah, earthquakes this week. Very, very concerning, actually. Karen, thank you very much for this, sharing the link to her talk. So if anybody's interested, this looks like it's going to be on Family Tree .co.uk, an overview of British India records with a case study, Finding Great Uncle Fred. That sounds really good. An overview of British India records. So it's the 8th of April. So what is that? 6, 7, Monday. If you get the chance, tune in and watch Karen and support her. I will definitely do my best to watch that one. It sounds really good. Thanks, Karen, for sharing that. We love that. We love that our community is part of this overarching bigger genealogy world, and it's exciting to see people having success and sharing their knowledge and their expertise. It's really cool. So thanks Karen for that very much. Okay, great. Heather says thinking about building an ark. You're more than welcome to some of ours. Yeah, I mean, fair. Yeah, I get it. When you're in the rain all the time. I grew up out in the Pacific Northwest. I actually grew up in the rainiest town in the United States. And so I know precipitation very well. I do miss it sometimes, but I know if I was in it all the time, I would be making comments like this. I also, of course, then as a result, grew up around earthquakes a lot. So Rita has commented that, it's a low magnitude earthquake at 4.8. It is, but it can still do damage and can still impact people. So, especially in an environment that is maybe not as accustomed to earthquakes. So anyway, right. Let's stop talking about the weather. Okay. I have one cat right here in front of me. You can't see. The other one is running around somewhere. I'm hopeful that they're going to behave for the next 45 minutes. Right. So today we obviously are going to talk about new records, but let's put the question of the week up on the screen first. And here it is. What standard do you think of first in genealogy? Thought-provoking question, I hope. What standard do you think of first when it comes to genealogy? And yes, absolutely, this ties into our records this week. And yes, there's a little bit of discussion at the end. If you have seen my sessions, there's always a little something in there, I hope. Right. So that's the question. If you respond, please put the QOTW in front of your response so we know you're actually answering the question of the week. Yeah, let's start to see your responses. Matthew, you're welcome. It's good to see you. Matthew said he's late. He had some connection issues, but you are definitely here now, so that's good. All right. Question of the week responses. You know what, you guys, I don't understand what you mean by standard. Okay. Well, that's a good question, Daphne. That is a good point. So if you're unfamiliar with genealogy standards, now is a good time to jump over to Google. However, there are lots of ideas that are going to come in through the chat. So you can definitely watch the chat, Daphne, and see what other people are commenting on. And I'm going to leave it at that. I'm going to leave it very vague for now. And we're going to go into the question or the new records, and we'll see what you guys come back with after we do those updates. So let me get that ready. Hang on. Just 1 second. So we're actually going to start new records this week with, let me take the banner off. Sorry. Newspapers. We're going to start with newspapers today. I decided to break it up a little bit. I always start with the new records, but We are going to start with newspapers instead. So, newspapers, 272,000 brand new pages this week with 22 updated titles. We have 2 brand new titles, the Daventry and District Weekly Express, and you see the years there. So, from 1986 to 2002 with a few gaps. And then the second one is the Lincoln Leader and County Advertiser from 1896 through 1929. Again, some gaps in there, but some really great content. When I went to read about the new papers, Rose had put this really fantastic front page from the Daventry Express on the blog post on the British Newspaper Archive. Could not stop myself from using it. So if you go over to the BNA blog, you'll see the same image. But how can you not you can't pass up a UFO headline and a cover page. Even Liam giving some props, right? Love that cover story. So true. So shout out to Rose. She is the one who writes our BNA blog and does all this wonderful research and content discovery for us. And she does an incredible job. There are 22 updated titles. I did not try to list them out on a slide because that would take up too much space and it's hard to read. So if you if you are interested in reading more details about those papers, please head over to the British Newspaper Archive and read the blog post. Liam, I'm sure, is going to share that link in the chat, even though I didn't warn him ahead of time that he should have it ready. So give him a second. My cat's getting mad at me. He's trying to lay down on the keyboard. It's really awkward. Read more about those newspapers. It's really good stuff. This week's records, I think, are really, really interesting. And you guys know I love social history. So, oh, yeah, that's right. Oh, quick shout out. Actually, we did get the BNA Instagram to 10,000 followers this week. Thanks to Rose and her hard work. So if you're on Instagram and you haven't followed the BNA, please do. It's a fantastic feed. It's a lot of fun to participate in that content. So follow BNA. Yay for BNA. Okay. This week's records, social history is totally my jam. And so this week's records are exciting to me. So this week we did a couple of new collections from Coventry. These are actually in partnership with the Coventry Archives, and these are exclusive. So you won't find these anywhere else. We have vehicle registrations from 1921 to 1944. You guys, this is cool. And then we have company directories and publications from 1908 to 1966. And I'm going to show you some examples of both of these. But I just I say this all the time now, but I feel like I really wish some of my ancestors had stayed in England for a while longer so that I could make use of some of these for my own research, my own purposes. But just playing around with these records is really awesome. I have never seen a record set like this before. And one of our colleagues, Steve, who does a lot of this kind of detail work with our partners, he kind of made the same comment that, this is a really unique record set. So and I love that it is solidly the interwar period, right? 1921 to 1944, cutting across a big chunk of World War II. I just think these are fantastic. So let's take a look at what these are. So here's an example of one. So these were created on the back of the Motor Car Act of 1903, which came into effect on the 1st of January 1904. It required all motor vehicles to be entered onto an official register. And in Coventry, they use these little cards. So these are car registrations, but also motorcycles with and without sidecars, which is a fun little piece, right? Sometimes the motorcycles are listed as cycle, or like you can see on the screen here, there's one that says bicycle. These are motorized vehicles. So they are not bicycles like with pedals. These are definitely motorcycles, because bicycles have never been, there's no registration required on bicycles. So most of them are double-sided, especially the earlier ones. So on the first side, you get the information about the vehicle itself. And then on the back side, you get the registered owner, the first registered owner, and then the last registered owner. So if it's been sold multiple times in between, so sorry, I said that wrong. The last registered owner, meaning this is the person they bought it from, right? So there's kind of like a history of the vehicle itself, which is kind of cool. Um, and you get all sorts of data, right? Like the date it was first registered, obviously the type of the vehicle, right, and what you're looking at, and then the names and addresses of the people actually on the registration, which is really really cool. So it's a genealogical a piece of evidence, right? Because you have an address there and names, but it's also just this really amazing cultural history piece, um, which is so delightful. And of course, Coventry, right? The Detroit of the UK, to put it into a US context, sorry for that, but certainly a huge area for manufacturing and distribution of motor vehicles, kind of the heart of that industry. And so to have these records is really pretty awesome. I think they're really special. I have a couple more examples. So this one actually is for a motorcycle with a sidecar. So you can see where it says type and it says S/car bicycle. Um, that is definitely a sidecar, right? So one of the vehicles that was registered that way, and you see the last owner is the Astons of Coventry, which is cool. And then this one, I wanted to show this one because it's just a standard vehicle, right? But it's full of detail, right? So it's a regular vehicle. It's a 4-seater. It's a black car. It's so good. Registered on the 1st of July, 1926, and the first license expired on the 31st of December, 1926. So it was only good for 6 months, and it was being registered by a man named Percy Lawrence. Sorry. Who is actually in Essex. His address is in Essex. So these are not strictly limited to Coventry, which is also really cool. And the last registered owner, the person he's buying it from, is Edward Owens Esquire, a member of the RAF. So you kind of get like, this capability of kind of digging into both people. I did look for Henry Percy Lawrence really quickly in the 1921 census, and guess what? He's a military guy. So they are probably, right, buddies in the service of some kind, or they met each other probably somehow over the service, and he's buying a car from his buddy. I think that's cool. I mean, I don't know. I have 5 seconds of looking at this. I could be completely wrong about that, but they're so cool. And yeah, they're really exciting. So I hope you guys agree. I think they're really neat. I want to just put this up really quick because Karen is joining us from a bus in South London. So thank you, Karen. That is dedication. We appreciate you so much. And then, yeah, Robin, you started to see Robin left this comment too, a car with 9.8 horsepower. Like, whoa, slow down, fellas. And what would they think of our cars today? So anyway, these are just really neat, right? Okay, let me see what else I prepped for you guys. Oh, on the search page for these, you get your standard search page, right? But then down at the bottom, there's extra materials, useful links, and you want to make sure you always check that from us, because there's a lot of information there. In this case, we've added a list of vehicle registration plates from 1921 to 1944, so you can kind of go down through the year span and see the vehicle registration. So this is a very different system than what we do in the US. So I was a little bit like, what do I do with this list? But one of the things that occurred to me is that there's lots of pictures of cars out there. And in many pictures, you can see the plate. You can see the registration plate. So we call them license plates. Do you call them something else? I'm not sure. Anyway, sorry, I got sidetracked to my own brain. But if you have a photograph with the plate in it, with the registration number, then you could, in theory, correlate that back to this list and at least know when the vehicle was registered and maybe give you some insight on the ownership of that vehicle. That's an idea. So that is the Coventry vehicle registrations. Cool set. Very, very cool. Andrew's giving some clarification in the comments on. Oh, thanks, Andrew. Andrew's helping me a lot on the spot. There are registrations. Licensing is the tax paid, right? And some information about taxation. So, so helpful context, Andrew. Sorry, I am probably not the best person to talk about vehicle licensing and registration in the UK. This is not my strong suit at all. But there's a lot of people on holiday this week, so you guys are stuck with me. And thanks, Liam. He calls it a Reggie plate, but maybe that's not quite right. Okay. All right, let's move on. The second set from the Coventry Archives this week is the Company Directories and Publications, 1908 to 1966. 22,000 pages, and these are, again, really unique and really interesting because there's just a huge scope of content in these publications. So, oh, wow. Okay, Andrew, what? We need a photograph. His car was built in Coventry in 1927. That's so cool. Right. So these are publications from various corporations and business entities essentially across Coventry. And some of them are really small, but some of them actually cover a pretty decent year span, right? But they come from all these different companies, right? So the Rudge Record is the magazine basically for employees of a bicycle and motorcycle manufacturing company. Loudspeaker is the works magazine of the telephone factory in Coventry. Standard Car Review, the works magazine of Rudge, Whitworth, Coventry bicycle and motorcycle manufacturers, right? The Standard as a vehicle. And then the Employees Quarterly, 3 volumes from the Armstrong Siddeley Motors in Coventry. And then, we're not done yet, it just didn't all fit on one slide. The Link from the Coventry Chain Company. I love that. I love that the Chain Company has the Link as the title of their publication. I think that's cool. It's very tricky, very, very smart. Oh, and Andrew's left a link for pictures if anybody wants to see his 1927 built-in Coventry vehicle. I will definitely be clicking on that link in a minute. The Limit, 1 volume from 1918 to 1920, and they are motor engine manufacturers. And then the Coventry Directory as a business directory covering kind of all life and trade in Coventry for that particular time frame, 1921 to 22. Now, again, these small volumes, but all together, they are an incredible resource for finding all sorts of information. So we did a little bit digging, of course, because how can you not? And you find really standard genealogical data, right? Weddings, births. This is from the Loudspeaker, which is one of those publications. And that wonderful photograph of Mr. and Mrs. A. Diamond. Like, that's cool, right? Like, that's good stuff. And it could, because they're celebrating their employees, right? This is really interesting. The swim teams, the GEC swimming teams, also from the Loudspeaker in 1938, both men and women, or as they say, the gents and the ladies, which I love, and their trophies, right? Like all their hardware, as my daughter would say. Fabulous. The Rudge Record and many of the others published information about World War I veterans. So in this case, this is soldiers who returned from the war and were employed with the company in 1918. But we also have, of course, memorials of people who didn't survive the conflict. So again, from the Rudge Record, really, really interesting stuff. So this is much more than just learning about the business or the manufacturing trade that they were involved in. This is very, in certain levels, very personal and very emotive content that really, I mean, if you don't have a photograph of your ancestor, and the one from the newspaper is all hard to see because it's from microfilm, like this is a much clearer, much picture photo, right? So incredible opportunity for those of you who have ancestors from this area who worked at these companies. What I loved about some of this is that you can correlate the vehicle registration over to the actual publication, right? So they kind of go hand in hand. So in this case, this person is registering a 1938 9 horsepower standard vehicle. And you can see his name and address, etc., at the bottom. But then you go into the publication set and you get the publication from the same time frame so that you can see about the vehicle itself when it was originally released and what they were saying about the car and that model of the vehicle, etc., etc. So it's just a cool way to kind of bridge the gap between, historical records that are very factual and then this contextual content that really kind of brings the whole thing to life, right? So for me, certainly, I don't have the same context with these lines of vehicles and these manufacturers, right? Because they're not known in the US. I didn't grow up with these cars, right? As many of you would have. So for me, being able to see kind of the visual image and the publication of a vehicle is really cool. Also, you can't deny how awesome the logo is for the Standard Car Review, like the headline of the publication. That is some cool graphic design, right? I actually really like it. It's very retro. as it should be. It's a 1937 publication, right? But like, it's really neat graphics. I was thinking about making it my background on my Facebook page. I don't know. We'll see. We'll see what happens. I just love it. I like the font and the style of it. Right. So, um, as we are talking about genealogy today, what standard do you think of first in genealogy? I came up with this question because I learned about the Standard vehicle, the Standard company producing vehicles in the UK, which I probably have heard of, but not really given much thought before. So it's a little bit of a trick question. Did anybody come up with automobiles as their standard for the question of the week? Haha, get it? I wish there was someone in the room who could actually have volume on that would laugh at that silliness that I shared. Um, but there's not. It's just me and my cat. So that's my segue from records into our question of the week. I hope people appreciate it. It took me and ChatGPT a little while to come up with that. Um, okay. I clicked the wrong button. Let's go back to question of the week then and see what you guys all said. I know there were a couple of questions about not understanding the question, right? So I will go back to those in just a minute, but let's see what the input was. Sue immediately came up with the genealogical proof standard, and yes, that's very common terminology, I think, in the genealogy world. But and as you'll see, I actually like to break that down. So genealogical proof standard is kind of where standards start, although definitely not as common a term in the UK. And Karen pointed that out also, right? Not widely known in the UK. The first one Karen thinks of is exhaustive search, which is probably one of the most common ones that's referred to, but also the one that's probably most misunderstood. If you're unfamiliar with the genealogical proof standard, you can read it on the link that Karen's provided. Liam's also going to pop a couple other links in the chat for us that take you to the organization that actually came up with it, which is the Board for Certification of Genealogists. Now, yes, this is a US-based organization, but the standards that they wrote are universal and global. So certainly something that we can learn from. Okay, let's see what else you guys had. Gordon said, birth, death, marriage, actual records, not transcribed as mistakes happen as primary records. Even then, they're only as good as the person writing down the information. It's very true. And actually, so case in point, Gordon, I did this yesterday. So yesterday I had, I was working on a project with Ellie, and she had found a mention of a baptism. And we went on a hunt to see if we could find a record of the baptism. Turns out it was on Family Search, the image of it. And it was one of those that is locked down to only members of the LDS Church. So I went off to my local Family Search Center to pull that one record. And I'm really glad I did, because guess what? The baptism was registered under a different surname than what she went by the rest of her life. So on every census, she had surname 1, but the baptism lists her under surname 2. I guess probably backwards, but you get my drift. And it is a key, pivotal part of that story, and really important, right? Because obviously then you're going, well, wait a second, surname doesn't line up with the daddy in the family. Something going on there, and it made us look further. So absolutely, transcription errors happen, and in a transcription format, you can't put in all of the information. So you really have to find that original record. Sarah basically said the same thing. Probably primary sources were available. Lynn comments, since I have taken genealogical courses, I think of the genealogical proof standard, which determines whether a conclusion has the acceptable proof. Right? Very good. Jillian, whatever BMD information I receive from other people, I always check actual records to make sure they're correct or not. Sometimes the dates or places can be slightly off. Yeah, very true. Very true. Good comment, Jillian. Thank you. Rosie thinks of the standard of proving to her satisfaction, not necessarily what is written on census, marriages, etc. I like that thinking, Rosie. I like how you phrase that, proving it to your satisfaction, because there are resources that you can kind of lean on a bit and trust, right? In the UK, the GRO indexes and the GRO service is kind of one of those. You can kind of generally say, I can trust this resource. Go get the image from the GRO and analyze it properly. And then compare that to the census and other records and parish records, for example. And have you proven it to your satisfaction, right? Most of the people who watch these sessions are not professional genealogists, and most of you probably won't publish your research. So adhering to very strict standards has pros and cons. But for most of us, what we really need is to be able to say, beyond a reasonable doubt, I believe this to be true, right? About our family, my family. So yeah, I like that, Rosie. I like prove to my satisfaction. I think that's a good way of saying it. Roz says more than one reliable source. Okay, that's a good standard. That's a good one to aim for. Especially when you are deep in it. And I would say that there's Roz, knowing you're from Massachusetts, there's a difference between one reliable source in the UK and one reliable source in the US, right? And based on where you're doing your research, you really have to think about what reliable means. I think reliable is probably the most important word in your statement. Is a reliable source can look like a lot of different things. Oh yeah, we do need a laugh track for Friday's live, or one of those drum sounds. I totally agree, Liam. Yes. Oh, Rosie, I like this one. I may be the only one who thought of the Morecambe and Wise sketch evening standard. I'm gonna have to look it up. I don't know it, but I will. Joe said standard makes me think of flag. See, and this is one of the reasons why I thought this question was tricky, because there are a number of ways to think of the word standard. And I think it was Matthew earlier, and this was going to be one of my segue questions, and I forgot to highlight it so I could find it easier. Matthew says maybe we need to define standard first, and I think that's true in this conversation, right? So many of you have already referenced the genealogical standards produced by the BCG, or the Board of Certification of Genealogists. And many of you have used examples or used your own language to interpret what those standards actually say. So what that tells me is you guys are actually already following the standards. I think some of you just probably don't know it. And yeah, so that was his first response to the question of the week. And then he came back just now and said, original sources and as many as possible, i.e. cross-referencing. I have one ancestor where the parents' names are the mother's name is not given on the transcript. It's on the parish record, but a bit hard to read, where it's clear on the bishop transcript. So yeah, very, very good example, Matthew. Yeah, so sorry. Joe put in another comment that I was like having to backtrack to. So a very good example of kind of comparing, again, those multiple sources, multiple resources. And Jackie nailing it, right? My dad had a standard Vanguard car. It's great. And Karen, the first thing she thought of was the Evening Standard, a London newspaper, of course, that still exists today. So these are all really good. These are all great. This is exactly what I was hoping you guys would come up with, actually, because it begs the question and the discussion around what actually is a standard. And do we, as casual people in the genealogy world, or people who do it for a hobby, or maybe you're a really passionate person who've been doing this for 20 years, but you never intend to publish or educate or anything, do you need standards? And I would argue that you do at least need to be familiar with them. And not necessarily because I'm one of those people who just adamantly like everybody must follow these policies and rules. I don't think that way. I think there's opportunity for a lot of creativity in family history. But if you read the standards and you understand them, at least on the surface, you understand that what you're looking for is reasonably exhaustive research, and you're looking for enough pieces of evidence that actually solidify your response and your theories, right? So if you start with a research question and at the end of the day you end up with a reasonable theory and you go, well, I'm pretty sure this is what happened and this answers my question, like, can you back that up? Can you hand that to me and have someone look at it and read it and go, yeah, that makes sense, actually? In my mind, the standards are actually really just common sense, kind of written down, right? And if you look at genealogy as a world, a piece of social history, a piece of the academic world, then we do need standards to kind of comply with those, the rigors of academia. Um, if you Even if you don't actually ever publish or do anything with it, right? There's still a good reason to have that information kind of set in stone and follow those standards, right? So let's talk about what those standards actually are. So if you are unfamiliar, the genealogical proof standard actually has 5 components to it. And it states that in order to reach a sound conclusion, we need to meet all 5 of those components: that we do reasonably exhaustive research, that we complete and have complete and accurate source citations, that we do a thorough analysis and correlation, that we work to resolve any conflicting evidence, and that we have a soundly written conclusion. Again, those are all fairly common sense pieces, right? Um, those are not strange sentiments, I don't think, to any of us. None of us would look at our genealogy work and go, "Oh, I don't think I really need to solve the fact that that John Smith and that John Smith look like they're the same man, but they're 3 counties away from each other. Meh, I'll just leave it like it is." Right? No, nobody does that. So again, I think this is fairly common sense and straightforward. But I think the idea of genealogical proof standard, right, in this big academic term, almost is intimidating to some people, and they go, well, I don't really need to do that because I'm not a professional. But I would argue that everybody needs some of this in their life. um, and and again, I'm going to reiterate that it's not necessarily that we have to follow these really strictly. It is common sense research to me. It is very much like, yes, I'm going to do everything I can to tell the most complete story of my ancestors, because it's fun, because it's interesting, because it allows me to do something that I enjoy, because it gives me the opportunity to be a little bit of a historical detective, right? All of those things, whatever your motivation for doing genealogy, you can actually kind of go back and go, well, if I just do that, then I actually am kind of already following the GPS in my own way. So I do recommend that everybody read the proof standards, and be somewhat familiar with them. It's not very long, actually, and fairly easy to access, I think. There's a couple of online sources, and this is one of them, right? So the citation down at the bottom of the screen, the Board for Certification of Genealogists. If you use your favorite search engine, just and search for genealogical proof standard, they'll come up right away, as well as a couple of resources from like Family Search, et cetera, that I think Karen shared already. Easy to access. They have all sorts of content. You can read articles or you can watch videos and do all of that. There's a Facebook group for it, et cetera, et cetera. Get into this as much or as little as you like. But I do think that if you just read through these quickly, you'll start to see how it applies even to the most casual of us. So I asked at the beginning, what do you think of first as a genealogy standard? This is the one that stands out to me, and that is reasoning from evidence, because this is the part that I enjoy the most. Right? It is acquiring a historical document and then analyzing it and correlating it to the rest of what I know about that person or that family, and actually saying, does this make sense? Do I understand why this record was created? What is this record telling me? And what else could it tell me? How do I put it in the context of my ancestors to say, this thing happened, 1921 census, but what was happening around this census? What was happening? That's why I like social history so much, right? Because I can look at a genealogical document like the 1921 census or a death record, and I can go, well, what else was happening in the world? How do I understand the context, the meaning, the nature of this document, and the impact it has on the research that I'm trying to accomplish? And then how do I correlate it to the rest of the information I already know, and then identify those contradictions if they exist, and kind of piece them out and puzzle through that. Right. So with that in mind, I think that was my last slide. Let me just double check. Yep. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen. I have one recommendation. The genealogical proof standard has been published in many, many ways. There have been workbooks and teaching guides, and of course there's lots of video content, there's webinars. I guess I'll have two recommendations. So my first recommendation is this book. Genealogy standards. This is the second edition. I think this is the 2021 version. I'm fairly sure this is the most recent, published by the Board for Certification of Genealogists. The genealogical standards originally came out. This is the first version I had. This is the Millennium edition. So that should tell you something. But there's nothing about DNA in this book. So they revised the standards when DNA became common practice, and it is, as you can see, in this version. So make sure you have a version, or you're looking at a version that includes DNA, so that you can ensure that that you're getting that information as well, right? Because the standards apply to DNA as well. So that's suggestion number one. Suggestion number two is to follow maybe a society that does a peer review journal. Like, so for example, the New York Genealogical and Biographical Society publishes the record 4 times a year. It is peer reviewed research. It all has to be compliant with the GPS. And the way that you read those articles is not necessarily because you're looking for information about that particular person they're talking about. It's because you're analyzing their process and understanding how they got to those conclusions, and then using the citations to do the same, to kind of, expand your scope and your knowledge of various record sets. There are many versions of peer-reviewed journals, so find one that you like and read it. The other option for reading material is to find a blogger that really talks about this in a very critical way. So, for example, Judy Russell, the legal genealogist, talks a lot about U.S. stuff. I get that, but she does a lot of analysis articles on the GPS as well. So when she posts about research, and her research in particular, she's very, very good at making sure she is kind of stating out the GPS as she goes through the process. So those are some options. The link that Liam shared in the chat will take you directly to this book just now. And then that website, like I said earlier, has lots of resources on this. They have articles that you can read online, video content, all sorts of things. Now, to reiterate, because it's got about 10 minutes or so, 15 minutes. I can read a clock. I am not saying that every single person needs to read this every day and go, oh, well, have I followed standard number 62? I don't do that. I don't know anybody who does that. Familiarizing yourself with the genealogy standards is a way to make sure that you're actually kind of being thorough, right? It's a way to make sure that you're doing due diligence to your ancestors. If you don't like standards and policy and guidelines and methodology, then ignore everything I've said for the last 35 minutes. I am a methodology person. I like to have a framework in front of me. I start every day with a research question and I work to achieve the answer to that. That works for me, may not work for all of you. So take what you will from this particular session and make it work for you, right? At the end of the day, I firmly believe that genealogy and family history is the reason that we do this is because it's fun and it engages us at some emotional level. And if you are the type of person who doesn't appreciate things like this and doesn't find this exciting and fun, then by all means, do it your way. It should satisfy you no matter what. But if you are interested in making sure that, or maybe I should say it this way, if you're interested in just understanding what the standards are, if you're interested in maybe just learning about another approach to family history, then reading through some of the material that we've given you today can be really helpful. Okay, I'm going to take another sip of tea because my throat is very dry now. And I'm definitely getting worse here. These allergies are really fantastic. I'm curious if anybody has any comments or questions about the standards. Daphne posted one that I am thinking about how to answer, but I'm going to put it up. So she asked, does that mean that Findmypast only publishes GPS transcriptions? Daphne, this is a hard question, right? You've put me on the spot a little bit here, and that's okay. That's okay. It's okay to challenge the companies that you work with, and certainly challenge the source providers that you rely on. I'm going to say this: I don't believe that we have a policy around this. Having said that, um, we believe very strongly in doing the best work that we can do. And sometimes that does mean that we send material back to whatever provider gave it to us, right? So, for example, if a society hands us, an index for something or transcription for some record set or a cemetery or something, we may turn it around back to them and say, actually, we need this to be a little bit higher quality before we accept it. We do have a standard and expectations of our providers, right? So the transcription houses that we work with, we try very hard to make sure that they do quality work. But we also deal with data in massive amounts. So spot checking every single record that goes on the site is actually impossible. Um, and I mean, we would need a tremendous number more staff to do that, and that would then raise your prices, and that, of course, doesn't it doesn't work, right? From a business model perspective, that just doesn't work. So, I guess my answer to your question is, we publish the highest quality records that we believe we can publish in a reasonable way that keeps our customers satisfied, but and adheres to our internal policies in terms of quality, but also within the realm of making sure that the site remains in an economical choice and like economically reasonable for our customers. So it's not a straightforward answer, Daphne. It really isn't. Um, but it's not. But it's a complicated issue, right? How do you run a business, but also adhere to these policies at the same time when they conflict in many ways? So anyway, I hope that helps answer your question, Daphne. But if you need more specifics, feel free to reach out. You can access us. Of course, anybody can access us. Oh gosh, I lost what I was trying to do. At support, right, through our customer support team. If you email support@findmypast.com and you tell them in the email, I want to talk to Jen some more about this issue that she raised on Find My Past Friday, then they'll just forward it to me and I'll be able to respond. So, but feel free to email us on anything. Of course, we're always willing to talk to our customers and happy to talk to our customers. Okay. Oh, and Daphne saying nicely put. Okay, well, I hope that satisfies your question. I do obviously have to be a little bit politically correct there. I represent a company, but I want to be truthful and honest and transparent at the same time. Um, on the lines of standards, right? So there's been a couple of other comments. Ellen says she has a kind of a scattershot approach until she really needs to get serious, and then the standards apply. I think that's great. That's a great way to do it, right? And for me, I do that too. I do the same thing often. I go in and I grab all the low hanging fruit. Right, is how I kind of think of it. Like, where are these people? Obviously, and then when I really need to get serious and resolve something or answer a question or dig deeper, yeah, I can see that. I can definitely see that, Ellen. It's a great way to say it. Karen suggested a website for helping to write citations, sitebuilder.com, site-builder.com. Gosh, that was hard. I will second this site and highly suggest it. This is a fantastic, look at me trying to use my fingers. This is a fantastic website. I use it all the time. I am a very, very happy supporter of Site Builder. I think it's a fantastic tool. Please very, very much, if you are interested in creating good citations, and that is part of the standards, then by all means check out sitebuilder.com. That is, I don't get paid or anything to say that. But the creator of the site is a friend of mine, and she's fabulous. It was developed by a husband and wife team down in Australia. They're fantastic. Really, really love them. So thanks, Karen. That's a great suggestion. And then Karen adds, and I want to address this too, must admit it's not always easy to find source information on Find My Past to create good citations. Yeah, I know. And we're working on this. we've probably been saying that for a while. So it's a little bit problematic, isn't it? You're right. It's not. But this is something we're actively engaged in right now, and hopefully we'll have some answers soon and how to do this kind of in a more automated way. The problem, or one of the problems, is that we have so much material that we've published over the last decade or 15 years or so that doesn't have citation worthy information. So we would have to go back and kind of redo all of that, and it's a lot of work. So I get this. I understand this sentiment very much. I get frustrated by it as well. It is an issue I bring up routinely. So hopefully at some point we'll get that resolved. Rosie says you do have to think outside the box. I totally agree. The marriage certificate for my grandfather is a bigamous marriage and is in some respects a lie. His age, first name, and that he was a widower. He wasn't. That yeah, this is a great example. Someone who didn't know it was him wouldn't know if if you see what I mean. Yeah, I totally get it, Rosie, right? Because it feels like this person on his marriage certificate is someone else entirely, right? If that's the only piece of evidence that you're looking at, but because you have accumulated all this other evidence and you know that it's a bigamous marriage, you have the opportunity to kind of break that open and go, these things don't line up. But there's obviously a good reason for him to be lying on the marriage certificate, right? Because it's bigamous. So yeah, you put all those things together and you have just used standards to analyze and correlate your research findings and resolve any conflicts, whether you know it or not. You have absolutely just used standards to do that. Well done, Rosie. Good job. And actually, very interesting story. Okay. Just a couple minutes left, and I think I'm gonna probably call it pretty soon. There is a question from someone over on YouTube, just with the letter V. This is slightly off topic, but I want to bring it up in case anybody wants to throw some suggestions in the comments. Not on topic, but any reason why an ancestor in the 1750s England won't have a baptism record, but a possible younger brother would a year or two later. There's circumstances I can think of. I know there are going to be more in the comment section. If you are over on YouTube and you're using the comment thread over there, please do leave some suggestions for V, or V, a suggestion for you if you are a Facebook user. Go to the Find My Past forum group. If you're not a member, join. We'd love to have you, and ask the question there. And there are lots and lots of people there who would be happy to help you. And I'm just not going to answer. I'm going to wait for comments because I only have a couple minutes left on this broadcast. So V, that's my suggestion. Go to the Find My Past forum and see if you can post it there and see what happens. Okay. Oh, and Liam has posted the link directly to that. Everyone's welcome, of course, on the Facebook group. Okay, I think that is going to bring us to the close today. If you have other questions for us as a company or an organization, email us. What am I doing? We are happy to answer those questions. And we are happy to hear from our customers. Send us a quick email and let us know what you're thinking about and what you're into and what you're interested in, and what questions you have for us as a company. So maybe, yeah. I was going to say maybe we do like a session on like the top 10 questions asked to Find My Past or something like that, but I don't know. I'm not even sure how we would accumulate that information. I'm sure customer support could help me with that. Right. So with that, we're going to call it a day. Thank you all very much. Have a wonderful Friday and a wonderful weekend. And we have a lot of things going on in the world right now. So be safe, be careful, take care of each other, take care of yourselves. And we'll see you next week. And actually, you're stuck with me 2 weeks in a row, I'm afraid to say. I will be back next Friday as well, because again, lots of people on holiday, kind of turning that Easter weekend into an extended break. So I am hoping my allergies settle as well by then. So thanks, everybody. Cheers. Have a great week.